In this lesson, we'll take a look at using further procedural maps to modulate the colors of our objects. So just as we use the gradient ramp here to kind of change the color over the surface, there are a number of other different procedural kinds of maps that we can use. Let's start by looking at using noise. So I'm going to just isolate the fan blades here. Okay, and let's jump into our material editor. All right, and I want to get the material from this. Okay, and so it's going to be the fan blades right in here. All right, so let me just kind of move this up so you can see what's going on. So I want to change the color, but I don't want to just change it, as a whole color. I want to actually use a map to change this. And I want to get some variation in here. So one of the things that I can do is to just use noise. So let's go into Maps, Standard Maps, and let's drag in a noise map. Okay, you can kind of get a preview of what that currently looks like. Let's pipe that into the diffuse color. Okay, and we don't see any change here, so we need to make sure that we show the maps in the viewport. Now we can see that sort of change happen there. We can go into this noise. Okay, and let's go down to the noise parameters. We can change the type of noise it is. You can see how that sort of changes the look that we have from regular to fractal to turbulence. I think fractal gives us a good look here. We can change the size. So right now it's fairly large. We can go ahead and increase that size. You can see that that gives us something like that. If you want to get a very small sort of dirt type effect, you can decrease that size to something like that. You can keep going down very small. Get some variation in there. We can also change the color. So right now it varies from black to white. So you can see we get almost a kind of a static pattern there. So if we want to get a little bit more to the light side, we can take this black and just make it a little bit more gray. Okay, if we want to add a little bit of color, we can drop a little bit of color in here and just increase the saturation slightly. We get something like that. We can take down the white a little bit, maybe give that a little bit more color. If you want to tint that whole thing. Okay, and then we can play with the noise if we want to get something that's a little bit brighter, maybe a little bit lower. Okay, and so you can see you can real quickly, and I think that maybe is a little bit too much. So I'm going to just edit this color, just desaturate this a little bit. Take this one, desaturate it a little bit. Okay, and I'm actually darken this up a little. Okay, and let's lighten this up. So it's just a little bit more subtle. Okay, so maybe something like that. Go ahead and turn off the isolation to see what that looks like. We can add additional procedurals on top of that if we want to. Let's go ahead and take a look at, for instance, the pipes now. Let's add something a little bit different here. So again, we'll jump into our material editor, and let's just focus on that material, the engine pipes. Now this time I want to add some sort of paneling on the pipes, but I don't want to go in and paint all that individually. So what we can do is use something called tiles. So we'll grab this tiles map. You can see a preview of it right here. Just looks like kind of a grid. Let's drop it into the diffuse color. Let's make sure that we show the maps in the viewport, and then you can see that we've just really quickly dropped some tiles on here. Get some nice lines. Now if we want to come in and go in here and modify this a little bit, we have a preset type which will change how those lines are created. It's kind of like a brick, thing going on as far as the kind of tiles that we're using. So great for using creating something like brick. So let's say we want to get something like that where we've got the panels kind of all separated out like that. Okay, we can also start to change the color of these panels. So let's say we want these to be a little bit darker. We can go into the tile setup under the advanced controls, take our texture and make that a bit darker. Okay, and let's add a little bit of color to it. And I'm going to add maybe a little bit of green to that. maybe something like that, maybe a little bit darker. We can also vary the color a little bit based on each tile. So if we go ahead and take that up, you can see that all of these little tiles are slightly different colors, and you can see that even more up here in this map. So that's kind of nice to be able to vary the different colors here. Okay, we can change the count of those along the horizontal and then along the vertical, so you can get something closer to what you want, maybe something like that. We can also make the grout different, so we can, right now it's kind of a gray, we can go ahead and darken that grout up. Okay, and we can thin it out too, so if those lines are a little bit too thick, you can go ahead and take those down to something a bit thinner. So you can see we can real quickly get a nice looking tiling effect of these metal panels making up these pipes. And again, we can go up here and it's procedural, so we can always go in and change things up. So I would change this value, maybe change this value to get more panels, change up the color variance. So that means that we don't have to go in and change a bitmap. We can just come in here, change these parameters, and these procedural maps will change for us. And so this tiles map is going to be really, really useful for us. Okay, let's use it also on the engine exterior here. Okay, so right now, if we go ahead and just click on this, you can see we have the gradient already added. And let's actually hold off on this one, this particular one, until I think we have a lesson coming up on combining different maps. So we'll use that since it already has one on there. We'll go ahead and touch on that in that lesson. But we do want to add the tiles to the outer portion here. So we'll get this engine outer material. Let's again add our tiles. Let's add it to the diffuse color. Okay, let's show the maps in the viewport. Let's zoom out a little bit. Okay, then we can go into our tiles, and we know that we want them to be that sort of red color, so we'll go back and get kind of a red that is close to the color that we want here, kind of darker red. Let's add a little bit of variation to those. Let's change up let's go ahead and change up our preset type up here. So I'm going to change this to the fine running bond. We'll change the grout to a darker grout, and let's decrease the amount on that. So you may have to render that to see exactly how that's going to look. If you just want to do a kind of a quick render to see those lines in there, but you can see how that is giving us some nice tiling in there. Okay, and let's see, we've got the grout. Let's go ahead and darken it up a little bit more. Okay, let's vary that color a little bit more. So we get some of the panels are a little bit darker, some of them are a little bit lighter. Okay, and again, we can do a quick render to see what that looks like. Okay, so once you've got the panels set up the way that you want, in a future lesson we'll use that same panel look and a map to actually drive the bump. So we'll see how it looks as kind of raised up panels rather than just the lines. But right now we've just got those set up visually as kind of these paneled lines, and you can change the layout of those just by coming in and again just inside of your tile here you could change the type of preset that you're using to change up how those look. There's the running bond, Flemish bond. Okay, and then you can change the numbers as well if you want to kind of change those numbers up. You got the horizontal count and the vertical count as well if you want to get more panels in there. All right. So just change that up a little bit if you want to. And in the next lesson, we will come in and look at just doing some basic UV work. So up to now, we've been fortunate we haven't had to do really too much with the UVs, but the UVs are going to be really useful in helping us define how textures are applied to our objects. So we'll go ahead and look at that in the next lesson.